So the team group classifications for the FIBA Africa Women's Basketball League 2023 qualifiers are as follows. So you're seeing Group A, you've got APR, got Equity, you've got Vijana Queens, you've got Gladiators. So Equity Bank will be representing Kenya in that group. Then we have Reg, we have KPA, you've got JKT Stars, you've got Nile Legends, you've got JKL Lady Dolphins. So you're seeing Equity and KPA representing Team Kenya in this go around in the Africa Women's Basketball League 2023. So first things first, I just want to get this thing out of the way. I saw people asking about the reason as to why Zetech is not going to play, and for obvious reasons, I just felt like they're not going to be able to make that push and make that leap because they're an educational institution, and I don't think that they had committed finances and committed like a budget to be able to like take the team there. So honestly, I just felt that as I saw like they were not posting a lot on that, and a lot of people have been asking about that. So with that one out of the way, so Equity got swept by Zetech 3-0 in the semis. So I just knew I was just happy to see like a new team go there. But one thing that showed me is, let's say for instance, KPA and Equity out of the picture. Let's say a team like the Zetech Sparks matched up with the UN Dynamites. Let's say the UN Dynamites made it through to the finals, and let's say Zetech won in that case. There's no KPA, there's no Equity Hawks. There's no KPA Dockers women's team, and there's no Equity Hawks. This is even a question that I asked myself. If Zetech couldn't make it, that means these other academic institutions can't make it as well because of like the budget that has been set aside for like those sporting activities. Some of these teams, the money is coming out of pocket from some other source. Let's say for example, they have well wishers there, and they have like a certain way that they allocate funds. So when I saw that, it just sent alarms off my head, and just felt like other teams will not be able to get that opportunity. Let's say for example Zetech and UN made the finals, just as my hypothetical, and Zetech won, and let's say for example they pull out from the finals and UN pull out from the finals. That means we will not be having a team in the FIBA Africa Women's Basketball League 2023 qualifiers. We didn't have a Zone 5 team. We didn't have any team representing Zone 5. So with that out of the way, I honestly feel the money teams will always get a fair shake to this, and the teams that are not affiliated to like academic institutions will always thrive and be able to like get to these points. As much as we want competition to be there in our country in basketball, it has been so monopolized to the point where we will never know what another team can produce, because you have seen the same teams year in year out. You have seen KPA and Equity compete all the time. You have seen these teams compete every single time. Last year they were there. KPA made the finals, they blew it. They lost to a Sporting, and they also lost to a Sporting again in the FIBA Africa Women's Cup. They lost again. Equity, they lost in Zone 5, and they just didn't have it in there. So you're just having the same team. Majority of the time, I can say 80% of the same roster that is being sent there, and I can say 100% of the time you're just going to get the same result as we got last year, because as you get to those points, these teams don't know how to adjust to that. They know how to adjust for Kenyan games, and they look so good when they play inside our borders, but when you go outside and you play continental b-ball, we really struggle a lot, and we are the worst, among the worst teams that are there. This is not a bashing video, but given the stats through the years, I have been very lenient on looking at the statistics and looking at the historical reference of these teams to be able to like know that. I know Zone 5 Equity has won at some point, but given in these recent times, as the basketball ecosystem keeps changing and the way teams are just gearing up towards those points, towards those positions, it's actually quite difficult to go about games the same way. If you keep going about games the same way, it's very hard to be able to like compete, because the game keeps evolving and teams keep evolving, strategies keep changing. If you run up the same plays year in year out, you're going to be found out at some point. And I feel like Kenya through the years has been found out so many times, to the point where we have lacked new ideas and new strategies to win games. This is the same thing that plagued KPA even last week, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, when they played in the road to Bal. The men's team, I can say, we just got outclassed there, and they just were too rigid in how they went about these games through the years. And this year they tried some different things. They brought in a new coach. They brought in 3 foreign players. They brought in Are Local in there. They brought in, like, those guys. Then they still dropped some players from their initial squad, and they went with the players that they had at the time. And also they lost a couple of players in free agency. So given that time it was like a new team, so there was not enough time to be able to like gel like that, and it proved quite challenging. And they only won one game against a team that lost all 3 games, and they lost against Dynamo and Pazi. Pazi were just the strongest team, and they just had the strongest side. So we talked about that in the previous video, but in this one we're looking at the women's team. KPA, let's start with KPA. KPA is a team that has dominated every single team in our country. From last year's postseason to this year's postseason, they have shown the strongest side. And this is this season that came to a close in KBF. They won every single women's game, and they swept every team in the playoffs. They swept in the first round, swept in the second round, and they swept in the finals. So they are the strongest side. That's actually a very good achievement, going unbeaten like that. But if you look closely at the Africa Women's Cup that they played last year, out of 7 games they won 3 games, lost 4. Okay, when they did that, they won 2 games in the round robin, games that the teams were playing each other, and then they lost in the quarterfinals to a team that they lost to in the finals of Zone 5. And that team that they lost to, A Sporting, went ahead to win the whole thing against Interclub. A Sporting versus Interclub, they won the whole thing. After winning Zone 5, they conquered Zone 5 and they conquered the Africa Women's Cup. So, and KPA was in the receiving end of their journey towards that point. So despite that result of even winning the regular season and showcasing that they can be able to like play in Kenya, going outside and playing outside has been quite difficult for KPA to be able to like get to that point. And even the unbeaten season, there's a blemish there where in the Africa Women's Cup in continental basketball they just couldn't get the job done. So that's like an Achilles heel that they had. Right now they are presented the same chance and the same opportunity, and they're just more or less going to face Reg. They face them in Zone 5. They faced a couple of these teams in Zone 5. Even Equity faced these teams in Zone 5. But KPA, despite winning domestically, they have not been able to win in continental basketball, and they have been on the receiving end of bad plays after bad plays. So KPA, they have to lower their expectations, because even I saw an article from Citizen, should we expect more from these teams even when they go outside to compete? I feel like we should lower all our expectations on KPA when they are playing continental. And in domestic basketball they play well, but in continental basketball they really fall. This is not a knock on their skill set. All I'm saying is the talent that they have right now in that roster does not measure up to any other team in the country, so they'll always dominate. But the question is, when they meet some team that can be able to offset their power, how do they respond? So that's the big question. So enough of KPA. Going to Equity, the Equity Hawks. Okay, they're a very good team, very solid in fact, that they made the finals in last year's postseason. But in this year's, they got swept in the second round by the ZTEC Sparks, who got their revenge sweep on them in last year's postseason in the semis in 2022. So Equity, I feel like they're on the same boat as KPA. They have played in Zone 5 a couple of times. They have been there, done that. They won the championship in 2019. But since 2019, it's just all been downhill. And looking at Equity as well, they suffer the same fate as KPA. They have the captain of the national team in there. They've had like a lot of veterans, people, some players who have played in the national team a few short years ago, and that experience, they have it under their belt. But the problem is they still suffer the same thing. Domestically, they're able to beat these teams, the other Kenyan teams in the women's division. But when it comes to playing outside, it's just quite difficult for them because they can't be able to do anything significant. And this is actually shocking. How is it that they are not able to win outside, but they win inside? But the short answer that even I've seen through the years that majority of people seem not to like pay attention to is the simple fact that these players have been complacent and they've been used to winning to the point where even these teams, KPA and Equity both, they are complacent, they're used to winning to the point where they don't feel like they need to change anything. They feel like they can run up the same plays, against other teams. This has really backfired on them. It backfired on Equity in Zone 5 as they lost in the early stages of Zone 5. They couldn't do anything significant. And KPA proceeded and they gave out the result, a 3-4 record out of 7 games. And one of the even one of the things that I saw is when you are used to winning all the time and blowing out these other teams, you have a tendency not to practice new plays. Like KPA, they are used to winning, they're used to dominating, they are used to beating all these other teams by record margins, like 40-point blowouts, 50-point blowouts. There's no defense that they're being tested on. There's no team that can be able to test their defense well, and their offense really thrives, especially when they play here. When they play outside and they play with a team that knows how to defend them well, and they know how to take away that fast ball, those transition points, they really struggle in the half court because I've seen guards not shoot. How can you be a point guard and you can't even double up as a scorer or a playmaker? You always, some guys are just passive. I don't want to mention names because I just don't want to do that, but you get the point. The thing is, I'm seeing players that are getting shocked every single time when they play, and this go around is no different. As you can see, KPA matched up against JKT Stars, Nile Legends, JKL Lady Dolphins, and RAG. So I don't expect any flashy performances because it's always gonna be a scrap, even on national team level. Some players play for the national team, and there's always been a scrap when these people play. So I expect scrappy games. They'll do whatever it takes to win, even if it's not the most efficient way to win. They're just going to do that, and I've lowered all my expectations because as much as they domestically dominate the game here in our country, but when you go outside they struggle a lot. And that's one thing that they try to they try not to say it, but in this channel through the years you're seeing that we're always tracking these, and I'll always keep you in the loop all the way from 5-on-5 to 3-on-3. The competition out there is just built different, and the only way these teams can be tested, Equity and KPA, to see how quote unquote great they are, is when they play teams that are on their level and they can be able to compete against them. Because I feel like every single team has different expectations. For ZTech, it was to win the championship, and I feel like that was it. Even make the finals, that's it. They have achieved their expectation even despite being swept in the finals. But a team like KPA and Equity, the expectation is different. How can they compete in continental ball? That's the question. So the different teams have different expectations. Storm's team, UN Dynamite, ZTech Sparks, they're all in the same boat. Eagle Wings, all the same boat. Like, can they be able to play well in the postseason? But when it comes to these two teams, Equity and KPA, the expectation is different. Can they win in continental basketball consistently and not scrap? Are their players good enough to be able to adjust to that type of competition? So that's the big question, and those are the things that I look at, especially when I look at these games. So yeah, so if you guys, like the video, make sure to leave your feedback down in the comments. And I'm out. Peace.